Once you have finished adding Sharpie to your mandala, it is time to start working on some practice watercolors. And in order to do that, originally I had told you to shift your mandala to the side so you had a bigger border on the one side. So what you're actually going to do is take a scissor and you're going to cut off some of that border. Don't go too close to your mandala. Give yourself about a half an inch to an inch of a border still. On this strip of paper, first thing you should do is write your class number and your first and last name. You're going to get a handout that is going to explain the steps that I'm going to show you now. So you can follow along with the handout as you watch me. Number 1, and you should label it number 1, you're going to draw a color wheel. In order to do that, you need to draw a nice big circle. I'd say generally about a little bit larger than a quarter. It does not have to be perfect, mine is not. And you're going to divide it up into 6 sections. So this is a little bit different than our mandala because it's only going to be 6 sections. So an easy way to do it is just a vertical line down, and then an X. When you're creating your color wheel, start with one of the primaries, and it doesn't really matter where you put the first color. You're just going to color it in. Now once you have the first color, now you know that on either side of it has to be the colors that it makes. Oh, and that's a primary, so I'm just going to put a P for primary on the outside. Okay, so yellow makes 2 different secondary colors. One of them is green. So on one of the sides, I'm going to put green. Now green is a secondary color, meaning that it was mixed between 2 primaries. It was created by being mixed by 2 primaries. So now next to that has to be the other color that you would mix yellow with to make green. So the 2 colors that mix together are yellow and blue. So I'm going to color in blue. And blue is a primary color. Let's put the B for blue. I mean the P for primary. Next, you have blue, and it makes 2 secondary colors. One of them is green, the other one is violet. So next you're going to color in violet. Because it's a blended color, use an S for secondary. Now, the 2 primary colors that mix together to make violet are blue and red. So I'm going to put red. And red is another primary color, so I put a P. Now when you have yellow and red as the 2 primaries, the color that it makes, the secondary color it makes, is orange. And there you have your 6-color color wheel. So far, we've only been using the watercolor colored pencils almost as if they were just colored pencils. We were just coloring. Now, they look like regular colored pencils. However, instead of just having the word Crayola and a color, it says the word watercolor on it, and it also has a little paintbrush, if you can see that. Okay, so that's how we make sure that we're only ever using the watercolor colored pencils. Sometimes a regular colored pencil gets mixed in by mistake. Someone picks it up and just puts it in. So always check before you put color on your mandala that it has this little paintbrush and it says watercolor on it. Okay, so for number 2, we have number 1 is our color wheel. Number 2, actually number 3, number 4, and number 5, the instructions say to draw a shape that is at least the size of a quarter. So I could draw more circles, or I could draw squares or rectangles, or triangles. It's really up to you. I'm just going to draw some squares. So the first one says, Blend from a color to a tint, leaving some of the paper empty of color when you blend. A tint is a lighter version of a color. Okay, so let's see, I'll pick green. So I'm going to go from a color to its tint, to its lighter version. So in order to do that, I'm going to start with a good amount of pressure. And then as I go, I'm going to press lighter. It's really about how hard or soft I'm pressing down with my pencil. Notice how I'm not coloring straight up and down. When you color straight up and down, you are getting the paper with the pointed part of the pencil. I'm trying to go at more of an angle, so I get more of the side of the pencil. Okay, and then I get really light where I'm barely touching. And then I'm going to leave it blank. Notice how it doesn't look stripy. It's not like it goes from dark to medium to light. If it starts to look stripy, try to put like an in-between amount of pressure to try to blend the stripe away. Just nice light pressure. Okay, so we're still, so far, have just been using this like a regular colored pencil. So what we need to now do is use a paintbrush and some water to turn it into watercolors. Okay, so I'm going to take some water. Don't need a ton, so I can kind of wipe off some of the extra water. And first I'm going to apply water to the empty parts. Okay, I'm just going to apply some water to the empty parts. Then I'm going to apply some water. And as you can kind of see how it's starting to activate. The water picks up some of the color. Okay, now this in-between part, I'm going to clean my brush. So I just have clean water. And I'm going to try to go a little bit back and forth between the two. And what it does is I'm touching this side, and I'm touching this side, and you can see it spread if you look really carefully. That's whenever wet touches wet with watercolor, the color will spread. So I'm just gently having the one side sort of touch the other side. Now, with a drier brush, I don't need to add more water. There's a lot of water there. I could even wipe it on a paper towel to dry it a little bit. With a drier brush, I'm just going to go back into the sort of wet watercolor area. I'm going to light little circles to blend. I'm going to blend from light to dark, because if I blend from dark to light, I'm going to spread the dark into the light, into the tint, into the lighter color, and I don't want that. I want to go from the lighter to the darker. And there you go. I have a nice blend from one side to the other, where it goes from the pure color to its tint, to its lighter version. Number 3, the next box, says to blend from a color to a shade by mixing in black. A shade is a darker version of a color. I'm going to highly recommend that you not use one of the lighter colors for these. You can try it, like maybe on the side, but especially for your first one, it's more difficult to go from one of the lightest colors to the dark than it is to go from one of the darker colors. So later on you can try that, but for your very first time doing this, I do recommend one of the darker colors. So I'm just going to use blue this time. Okay, and whereas last time I only did color for part of it, because I want a nice solid blue, so from blue to dark blue, I'm actually going to put color in the whole box. Okay, so now we want to go from the pure color to a darker version of it, a shade of it, by using black. So I'm going to take black and I'm going to add a little bit along the edge. Similarly to how I made the green go lighter and lighter, I'm going to press more along the one side, and as I want to get closer to the pure blue, I'm going to press lighter. So it's going to be less of the black. So you can see how it has a little bit of, tiny bit of black, more and more and more until there's a good amount of black. So now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put water on one side, and you can see it sort of activates that blue. Okay. Then I'm going to put some water on the other side. And you can see that it actually does mix the two layers together, the blue and the black, a little bit. Clean your brush. Now with clean water, a little bit of clean water, I'm going to do a little back and forth so those two sides touch. Okay, clean water, and whenever I see a line, I can just do some light pressure. So I see a little bit of a line here, so a little bit of light pressure, and I can blend it. You can see how it goes from blue to dark blue using black. Number 4 says to blend from one primary to another primary, creating a secondary color in between. So here, go back to number 1. The 3 primaries are yellow, blue, and red. So you're going to pick 2 of those. So I will pick, let's pick red and yellow. Okay, so I'm going to start by adding some red on this side. And some yellow on this side. However, if I were to add water to this, I would go from red to white to yellow. And I don't want that. I want to go from red to orange to yellow. So I'm going to press lightly, like I did on the first one, and bring the yellow to the red. And then since red is the darker color, I want to be very gentle with this and not do too much. But I'm going to add the same thing, have a nice light pressure. Notice how I'm coloring in these little circles rather than back and forth. I can kind of cover the page, the area a little bit more fully. Light pressure with that red. If I see it looks a little stripy, a little liney there, I go back and add a little bit more. I'm going to layer it. So I'm going to go back with the yellow again and add more colors overlapping. And even without the water, it's starting to look a little bit orange. Okay, so depending on how it looks, you can go back and forth a couple of times. Okay, so now, clean water on one side, wash my brush. Clean water on the other side, wash my brush. Just a little bit of clean water, not too much water on my brush this time. Just go back and forth. I'm sort of lightly touching both sides. If I want, it's like that. When I lifted up my brush, it left a darker spot. So this time with a drier brush, so light circles, wherever I see a line. Dry brush. Just try to blend those together a little bit more. Now you'll notice that it's not going to get as bright of a secondary color as the colored pencil will. It's definitely a more subdued secondary color, but it does work. It does make a secondary color. I will recommend, if you're using yellow, yellow's the trickiest because it's so light, and so it's very easy for both either red or blue to take over. And so one idea for that is when you're using, if you're trying to make green, the pack actually has 2 different blues. So if you're trying to make a green, use the lighter one. So as your primary, if you're trying to make green here, it makes a nicer green. When you use the darker one, the dark blue kind of takes over. So if you're trying to make a green for number 4, I'm trying to make that secondary color, use the lighter one instead. Number 5 says to blend from a primary color to one of the secondary colors that it makes, creating what's called a tertiary color in between. So if we were to make a more detailed color wheel, in between every secondary and primary color, there's something called a tertiary color. For example, between green and blue, there's something called blue-green. You might think of that as like an aqua color. Between blue and purple, there's blue and violet, there's blue-violet, kind of looks like a indigo kind of color. So there's another tertiary color between each of those. Now, do not pick a primary color and the secondary color that it doesn't touch, for example, blue and orange, because those are complementary colors. Those are opposites on the color wheel, and if you mix those together, you're going to get an ugly brown color. So stick to colors next to each other on the color wheel. Okay, so for this, I'm actually going to mix blue and violet, and just to be a little bit different, I'm going to pick the other blue for this. The technique is the same as in number 4. You put color on each side. And then you bring them in lightly overlapping. Okay, so you can see that it is even starting to blend together before the water is even added. Same process. Clean water applied to one side. Clean water applied to the other side. A little bit of water, clean water, back and forth, lightly touching each of those little puddles of water. Okay. Dry brush, clean dry brush, can go back in wherever you see an area that's not fully blended, blend it some more. Now, let's say you accidentally put way too much water and it's this big puddle. You can take a piece of paper towel and lightly absorb that. Okay, so that's one way to make if you make a mistake to kind of pick up some of that color. If you don't get a nice blend, or it's very stripy, or you can't get this to work, make more squares and keep trying. Okay, or more shapes. It could be circles or anything else, but keep trying. If you really struggle and you need even more room, go in the back. Okay, so I am going to eventually be giving you a grade on this, and I'm going to look for 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, these specific 5 things. If you have more than that, great. If you finish early and you want to experiment mixing other types of colors, that's an excellent idea. As long as it dries, you can use all of the back. I can even give you more paper if you need more room. But make sure that you have these for the grade.